There's a moment right before launch when everything is silent. You're strapped into your seat, the weight of your suit pressing against your chest, the hum of machinery, the only sound in the capsule. Outside, the sky stretches infinitely. Above you, below, nothing but Earth waiting to be left behind. And in that moment, a thought creeps in. What if something goes wrong? Space is the pinnacle of human ambition, but it is also our ultimate nightmare. A place where the rules of survival no longer apply, where the human mind, built for the comfort of Earth, begins to break under the weight of emptiness, isolation, and the unknown. The fear of space is primal. It is the fear of enclosed spaces, of endless voids, of the unknown lurking beyond. The stars. It twists the mind, turning even the smallest anomaly into a waking nightmare. And for astronauts, that fear isn't hypothetical. It's real, it's immediate, it's part of the job. In this video, we're diving deep into the psychological horrors of space. The phobias, the anxieties, the slow unraveling of the mind when confronted with the infinite. Because exploring the final frontier isn't just about technology. It's about battling the most fundamental fears within ourselves. Fear is not just a feeling, it's a survival instinct. It tells us when to run, when to fight, when to freeze. But what happens when fear follows you into a place with no escape? Space is the embodiment of fear, cold, vast, and completely indifferent to human life. It is an unforgiving void where phobias don't just exist, they thrive. Some fears are obvious. Claustrophobia, the terror of enclosed, suffocating spaces. Imagine being trapped inside a cramped spacecraft for months, with nothing but metal walls separating you from the emptiness outside. No fresh air, no way to leave, no sense of freedom. Then there's agoraphobia, the fear of vast open spaces. A fear that seems contradictory to claustrophobia, but in space, both exist at the same time. Outside your spacecraft, you float in an infinite black abyss where there is no ground, no walls, no sense of direction, just a void that stretches forever, swallowing everything. And then there is xenophobia, not fear of other people, but fear of the unknown. Space is the ultimate unknown. There is no certainty, no guarantee of safety. Every creak in the hull, every gust of solar wind rattling the spacecraft, every strange flicker in the darkness, it all feels like something is there, watching, waiting. But the most insidious fear of all, the one that lingers even after astronauts return to Earth? Isolation. Months without fresh air, no direct human contact, no real-time conversations with loved ones, just delayed transmissions, an eerie reminder of how impossibly far from home you are. The brain is not designed for this kind of solitude. Thoughts turn inward, the silence becomes oppressive, and over time, the mind begins to fracture. Even the most mentally resilient astronauts experience the third man factor. A phenomenon where people in extreme isolation begin to sense an unseen presence, a fleeting shadow in the corner of their vision, a whisper just beyond the range of their hearing, the unmistakable feeling of being watched, despite knowing they are completely alone. And what if that presence isn't just a hallucination? History is filled with reports from astronauts who have heard knocks on the exterior of their spacecraft, strange, rhythmic sounds with no mechanical explanation. Others have described seeing flashes of light with their eyes closed, as if something unknown was pressing against their vision from the void beyond. NASA doesn't just train astronauts physically, they train them psychologically, because the challenges of space travel aren't just mechanical, they are deeply, fundamentally human. And despite all the technology, all the training, all the preparation, fear always finds a way into the cockpit. And for those who venture beyond Earth, fear is not just something to overcome. It's something that never truly leaves them. From the moment you enter microgravity, your body stops working the way it should. At first, it's subtle, a strange lightness, a feeling of effortless movement. But within days, the changes become undeniable. Without gravity, your muscles weaken, your bones thin, and your body begins to reabsorb calcium, increasing the risk of fractures. Your blood pools toward your head, creating constant pressure in your skull, distorting vision, altering balance, and blurring cognitive processes. Astronauts often describe a tightness in the face, as if their own flesh is swelling against them. The physical deterioration is relentless, but the body still adapts. The mind does not. Inside the spacecraft, without gravity as a reference point, disorientation takes hold. There is no absolute sense of up or down. Simple tasks become a struggle. Reaching for an object, moving from one section of the cabin to another, even keeping track of your own body in space. Some astronauts experience phantom motion, a horrifying sensation of falling indefinitely, as if the floor has collapsed beneath them. But microgravity warps more than just movement. It invades the mind, distorting senses, disrupting thought patterns, and altering emotions in ways we do not fully understand. The worst of it happens when the neurologic system no longer knows what to trust. Sleep, such a basic necessity on Earth, becomes a nightmare in space. On Earth, sleep is anchored by gravity. The feeling of sinking into a bed, the weight of your own body pressing against the mattress, the rhythm of an ordinary day, giving structure to the night. But in space, there's only floating. Sleep becomes weightless and unpredictable. Even closing your eyes offers no relief, because it doesn't feel like resting. It feels like drifting into nowhere. Even worse, the sun rises and sets 16 times a day aboard the International Space Station. The body's circadian rhythm, the internal clock that governs wakefulness and sleep, is forcibly dismantled. Without external cues to maintain structure, the brain struggles to differentiate where one day ends and another begins. Dreams become hyper-realistic. Some feel conscious while dreaming. Others describe intense hallucinations between waking and sleep, visions forming in the darkness, impossible shifts in perception, an overwhelming sense of being somewhere else. But it's not just fatigue, it's neurological erosion. Studies suggest that prolonged exposure to microgravity changes the brain itself. Scans of astronauts who have returned from extended missions show physical shrinking in areas related to spatial awareness, emotional control, and memory. In deep space, the person you were when you left Earth may not be the same when you return, and in that erosion, the strangest symptoms emerge. Some astronauts report phantom limb sensations, as if their arms and legs have floated outside their bodies. Others describe the unnerving sensation that their heads are detached, drifting away while the rest of their body remains still. Even something as simple as swallowing feels unnatural, because in microgravity, fluids move differently. In the throat, some describe the terror of forgetting how to breathe, even for just a second. Everything once involuntary, movement, balance, sensation, must now be actively controlled. The second you stop thinking about it, panic sets in. And then there's the break. Scientists who study astronaut psychology use this term discreetly, but they all know what it means. It's the point where everything, the isolation, the disorientation, the neurological shifts, overwhelms the mind completely. Some astronauts become withdrawn, barely engaging with their crew. Others experience unpredictable mood swings, paranoia, even episodes of brief psychosis. It is not just theoretical, it has happened. The Soviet Soyuz 21 mission in 1976 had to be aborted because the crew psychologically deteriorated to the point of being unfit for duty. Reports claimed that one of the cosmonauts had a breakdown so severe that mission control feared for the safety of the entire crew. But what happens if the break occurs millions of miles away from Earth? Imagine you're on a 3-year mission to Mars. Halfway there, something changes in you. You no longer think clearly. You start questioning what's real. When you close your eyes, you feel like you're floating outside your body. You begin losing short-term memories. Your emotions become unstable. And worst of all, there is no way home, no emergency escape, no quick rescue mission. Just you and the walls of a spacecraft drift through millions of miles of empty space with nowhere to go but forward. Even after returning to Earth, no astronaut comes back completely unchanged. Walking under open skies feels unnatural. The body's reintegration into gravity is a painful process. Some feel restless, unable to understand why everything on Earth feels so heavy again. Others talk about strange sensations lingering, visions, in the dark, phantom movements, a feeling that part of their mind is still floating out there somewhere. Space does not just warp the body, it reshapes the mind, and the longer we stay out there, the more we change into something unrecognizable. Fear thrives in uncertainty. It grows in the absence of control, feeding on the unknown. And in space, everything is unknown. Astronauts are trained to face dangers, but training only covers what we can predict. The true horror of space, however, is that not everything can be controlled. Out there, just beyond the safety of the spacecraft, an invisible storm is always raging. Cosmic radiation, deadly waves of energy from ancient supernovae, from distant black holes, from the violent heart of the universe itself. There is no atmosphere to block it, no protective shield strong enough to stop it completely. Every second spent in space, radiation pierces the body, rewriting DNA, increasing the risk of cancer, altering the very structure of the brain. Then, there are the meteoroids. Tiny, unseen projectiles traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour. A grain of sand moving at that speed could slice through metal like paper, could puncture a space station's hull, could transform a routine spacewalk into a death sentence. And if that happens, if there's a breach, there is no rescue coming. Even inside the spacecraft, the mind is never at ease. Every sound, a sudden creak, a metallic groan, an unexpected beep sets off silent panic. Because in space, a single malfunction isn't just an inconvenience. It's a catastrophe, a failing oxygen system, a broken water recycler, a guidance error. Things that would be minor on Earth become life or death scenarios in an instant. And then there's the silence. People imagine space as peaceful, a place of stillness and serenity. That is a lie. Silence in space is different. It is unnatural. It presses against the brain in ways we are not built to withstand. It is total, absolute, and endless. And the longer you stay in it, the more it feels haunted, because the mind hates the unknown. It will search for patterns in chaos. It will see shapes moving in the blackness. It will turn shadows into figures, random noise into hushed whispers. Some astronauts report hearing knocking sounds on the exterior of their spacecraft. No source, no explanation. Others describe a sensation of being watched, of not being alone, even when logic insists that they must be. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all, even here on Earth, countless explorers have looked into the void and felt that something was looking back. But if the fear of space is rooted in the unknown, what happens if one day we find out we were never truly alone? Fear cannot be eliminated, it can only be controlled. Astronauts don't just train their bodies, they train their minds. Because in space, panic is a death sentence. A single unchecked emotion, a single moment of doubt can cascade into disaster. Every astronaut who leaves Earth must learn one fundamental truth. Space does not care about you. It will not comfort you. It will not make survival easy. It will watch silently as your body and mind begin to unravel. The only thing keeping you sane is you. So how do they endure it? The first defense is structure. Every minute in space is scheduled, every action planned in advance. Routine is a psychological anchor, a way to keep the mind focused on tasks rather than the abyss outside. Each morning begins with exercise, not just for physical health, but to burn off tension, to keep the body connected to reality. Then comes communication, talking to loved ones, sending messages to Earth. Even if the voices are delayed by seconds or minutes, even if they're nothing but pixels on a screen, they remind the astronauts that somewhere on a distant blue world, life continues. But structure and communication can only do so much. When the silence sinks in, when isolation becomes suffocating, when sleepless nights stretch endlessly through darkness, that's when psychological training is tested. Mindfulness and meditation become vital tools. Focusing on the present, keeping thoughts from spiraling, learning to exist in the moment rather than fearing what could go wrong. Yet not everyone succeeds. Some astronauts report feeling disconnected from reality, as if they are watching their own lives from the outside. Others admit that certain thoughts never fully go away. The fear that no matter how much they prepare, no matter how strong they become, they will never truly be ready for the void. And this raises a chilling question. If even the strongest minds struggle, what happens when we push further? Missions lasting months are dangerous enough. Missions to Mars or beyond, years in isolation, no quick return, no voices of reassurance, no certainty of survival. Psychologists study what 5 years alone in space does to a person. The answers are unsettling, the loss of emotional stability, the erosion of memory, the detachment from empathy itself. Because being human, being truly human, requires interaction, connection, grounding, and in the depths of space, where none of those things exist, what happens to the mind? What happens to the person? Some believe we will adapt, that our resilience will push us to evolve beyond earthly limitations. Others fear that the first true deep space travelers may not return home as themselves, that what comes back may be something else entirely. The human body was never meant for space. Our bones weaken without gravity. Our hearts struggle to pump blood in weightlessness. Our brains lose their ability to process time, reality, even identity. And yet, we keep going. We push past our limits, not because space is safe, but because we refuse to accept its indifference. But as we set our sights beyond Earth, as missions to Mars and beyond become a reality, the greatest challenge isn't just fuel, technology, or survival, it's the mind. Will we find ways to keep our sanity intact? Advances in artificial gravity, virtual reality simulations, and deep space communication systems promise to protect astronauts from the worst psychological effects of isolation. But are these solutions enough? Can the human mind truly endure years in the void, away from the touch of another person, away from the voices of Earth, away from the certainty that we even belong in the stars? Some believe we will evolve, that the first deep space travelers might become something else, something beyond human. Others fear that those who stare into the abyss for too long will not return as themselves. There is a final frontier, but it is not just a place. It is the battle between curiosity and fear, hope and madness, humanity and what waits for us in the dark. One day we will know the cost of pushing too far, of staying too long. The only question is, will we still recognize ourselves when we return?